Hey you guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Kemi and I make faith-based content here on YouTube. And today I'm going to be answering some Bible study questions. So a couple months back, I sent out a questionnaire to my email newsletter, which if you're not a part of, make sure you subscribe. I will leave the link down in the comments below. And it's been a minute because the way I have been fighting for my life to be able to release this video, the amount of warfare that I have faced just trying to release this video alone has been crazy. And so I know that God is trying to do something, and I'm thankful that I'm finally here, finally able to share these the answer to these questions. And I just pray that, you know, for whoever is watching this video, that this answers any questions that you have, and it just helps you like be able to not be as afraid about Bible study time and not be as overwhelmed with Bible study time, and just being able to get started, right? So let's get into the questions. One of the main questions I got, and I got different variations of this question, was where do I start? Like, how do I start Bible study? Like, which book do I start? Like, how do I know where to start, right? And my answer to that question is always one of the Gospels, whether it's John, Matthew, Luke, or Mark. Like, pick a Gospel and read it first. And the reason I suggest starting with one of the Gospels is because, like, as Christians, the foundation of our faith is Jesus, right? Like, so what better way to start studying the Bible than his story and just learning more about him? And so yeah, so my suggestion would be starting with one of the Gospels. My pastor recently did a spiritual formation Bible study workshop, and there was a lot of gems that were shared. One of them, when it comes to like where to start, is to do the whole New Testament and then go back into the Old Testament. And I think that would be super helpful, because I tried to do like from Genesis to Revelation. That did not work out for me. And then I tried to do kind of like a mix, like I would do a little bit of New Testament, a little bit of Old Testament. And you know, whenever I would get in the Old Testament, I would feel kind of like overwhelmed, lost. And part of it is, you know, if it comes from not having had that full understanding in the New Testament yet. So I would say, you know, it's better to read the full New Testament and then go and do the full Old Testament. So that would be my recommendation for that. I hope that helps. So the next question is more like a statement, and she said, I have tried Bible study but get overwhelmed quickly. How do I get over that overwhelm? I can relate to that. I'm actually in a season of feeling kind of overwhelmed with Bible study as well. And I would say what's helping me in this season is getting to the root of my overwhelm, right? Like for me, I'm overwhelmed because I crave like a deeper understanding of like the historical context and the cultural context and how that's affecting what's being told. And so like I'm having to do a lot more research than just reading to understand kind of like the setting and stuff of what I'm reading. And so that's taking a lot more time, and I'm like, Lord, I barely have enough time to do what I feel like is basic Bible study, and it's like, this is a lot more. So that has gotten overwhelming for me. And one of the things that the Lord kind of shared to help me with that is like doing my basic Bible study and then have one day a week, for example, where I do that more in-depth research stuff. So that helped, but it came from like getting to the root of my overwhelm though. So like if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, my first thing would be that I would say is ask yourself, what is the root of that overwhelm? Like what is causing you to feel overwhelmed? And then address that root. Does that make sense? I hope so. The next question I got, and this was another one that I got like a different variations of, and I just picked one that I'm gonna read out, and it says, how do I understand the full depth of exactly what God is saying when I'm studying the Bible? That's a good question. That's a good question. And I feel like the best way to answer that to start off is pray before you read the word, right? Like it's not, the Bible is not a book that you read on your own for understanding. Like there's gonna be a lot of stuff that you come across that you're like, first of all, what is that? And two, I don't necessarily like how this is worded. So questions are bound to come up when you're studying the word, but I think that when you pray before you read and you invite the Holy Spirit, and it's almost like a book that you're reading in partnership with God, it helps you be more open to hear from him as you're reading, so that you're not only reading from your own with your own biases, your own opinions, your own preconceived notions. Like, you're not letting that cloud your ability to understand what you're reading, but you're instead like in partnership with God as you're studying, like allowing him to speak to you, right? Like, I've heard people say that the Bible is one of the few books that you read where it reads you, but part of allowing it to read you is praying and inviting God into the process, so that like as you're reading, as you're studying, it's almost like an interactive thing that's happening, you know? The other thing that could be affecting your understanding when it comes to reading the Bible could be the translations that you're reading, right? Like, I remember when I started reading the Bible, I was reading the King James Version and I was in high school, so that was really hard to read. Like, it was like Shakespearean English and I was like, what is this? I recently heard that New King James is more is easier to understand. I haven't checked it out. I read NLT, New Living Translation, and the English is very digestible. So if you're struggling to understand what you're reading, I would also check what translation you're reading. Maybe there's an easier translation that you want to look at that may help with your understanding and like what you're reading. Another thing I think when you're reading, and that part of it is that partnership with God that I was mentioning earlier, where you kind of let go of like your preconceived notion, is not jumping too quickly to how does this apply to my life today, right? Like, spending time as you're studying the word to observe what's happening, so you can kind of get like the full context before you try to apply it to your life. I think that also helps with like being able to understand what God is saying, but like in full context, right? So if you are observing, right, like what's happening culturally, what's happening like in the text, point blank period, on a basic level, before trying to make it make sense in our current day 2024 life, I think that also helps get a clearer picture of the original intent of what was written, instead of like jumping to trying to apply it to your life today and being like, that doesn't fit, and then that creates then like this fight in your head of like, this doesn't make sense. And it's like, maybe it's because you're jumping a step trying to apply it to your life, instead of first reading it in context and understanding it in context fully first before trying to apply it to your day-to-day life. The next one is another one that's more of a statement than like a question, and it's my biggest struggle is not knowing how long to read or when to start and stop. I love that question. That's such a like practical day-to-day like thing. And my biggest thing with that is, before you study, right, like ask yourself, do I have the capacity, the mental capacity to study, right? Because the text is not something that you passively read. Like you can for certain books, like it reads like a story for certain books, but most of the time, like when you're Bible study, like it's in their study, so you have to be kind of in a mental space to study, right? And so with that, I think you have to check in with yourself first about like where you're at, and then determine how long you're gonna read. Like sometimes I read 5 chapters at a time, sometimes I read 1 chapter, sometimes I read a section within a chapter, sometimes I read a couple sentences out, because that's all I have in me. So I think first, like ask yourself, what do you have the capacity to do? And then if it's a day where you don't have a lot of capacity, right, like give yourself grace, but then don't try not to make it a habit. If it becomes a habit where every time you're sitting down to study, you don't have the capacity to study a lot, then maybe it's an indication to switch what time of the day you're studying, or like switch your schedule around to see when is the best time for you to study. There's been seasons of my life where I'm studying in the car, like I would get to work earlier, have my Bible in my bag, and then like study in the parking lot. There will be times where I'm studying at night. There's time when I study in the morning. So I think in different seasons, you know your schedule best, and you know God knows also. And so like bring it to him, ask him, talk to him about it, and he will reveal to you like pockets of time and when he wants to meet with you. There's been times where God has woken me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, Lord, it is too early. It is too early. But that's the time where he's like, no, like this is, let's talk. Hi, hello. And so yeah, I hope that helps. how do you know when God is talking to you? That's a question I get often on the socials, everywhere. I get that question so often. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. And it's such, I always get nervous about answering that question because it's such like, I feel like it can be a personal answer in the sense that like God speaks to everyone differently and God speaks to every one of his children differently. So it's like, I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but baby, he just does. And I feel like it almost comes with time though. Like the best way I can explain it is if you have a friend, right? And like the more you hang out with that friend, the more you spend time with that friend, the more you get to know them. Imagine that one day you get a text from that friend that seems off and weird and not like them. The only way, like what would allow you to discern that doesn't sound like my friend, is the fact that you spend time getting to know that friend. You spend time investing in that relationship, so you know what they sound like, you know what's in their character. Like if you have a friend that doesn't curse and one day you get a message from them where they're cursing, you're gonna be like, wait, that's not you, what is happening? And it comes from like getting to know them and spending time with them. So the more you spend time with God, the more you spend time in his word, the more you spend time learning his character, the easier it becomes to recognize when he's talking to you. So I hope that helps. I know that wasn't like a super specific answer, but I think it's a very personal thing in that God speaks to you in a way that he feels like you'll be receptive. And the other thing is like, we're not, it sounds crazy to say, or like not crazy, it sounds unpopular to say, because we've kind of gotten like we're a generation that's very obsessed with self. And so the idea of giving credit to anything other than our own smartness, our own creativity, our own whatever, like just feels crazy, right? Or feels like counterintuitive. But it's like, if you credit yourself for things that God has revealed to you, that also prevents you from being able to build that muscle of discerning when God is speaking to you. Does that make sense? Like for example, okay, quick story time. So when I first started my walk, one of the things that like I was struggling to come into agreement with, that was part of God's word, was the topic of submission. I struggled with that. Hey, my friend Brenda can tell you guys, I used to call her all the time like, Brenda, I don't like this, what? And she had been walking with the Lord for a lot longer than me, so like she was my seasoned Christian person that I went to anytime I had any questions. But I remember I was studying the word, and then there was something came up. I don't even remember what came up, but I remember telling God, like as I was battling with that thought, submission doesn't work. Like I've tried it in the past, like it's people just use it as an excuse to justify abusive behavior. Like I was just like, no Lord, like this I don't think this is wise. Like why do you want us, like show me why you think this is a good idea, because I don't think this is a good idea. And he was like, literally I heard this thought, like, I didn't ask you to submit to your boyfriend, I asked you to submit to your husband. You cannot misapply my word and tell me that it doesn't work. I will never forget that. He said, you cannot misapply my word and tell me that it doesn't work. And I was like, the way I was quiet in that moment, but it was like one of those things where I knew without a shadow of a doubt that was God. And I was in the beginning of my walk, and that was one of those moments where it was like, I could have said that thought came to me. I could have said, oh, I came up with that thought on my own. I could have credited myself for that and run with it. But then that would have prevented me down the line from continuing to build that muscle where when I'm studying the word and God is speaking to me, I'm unable to receive what he's saying, because I think, oh, I'm smart enough to come up with all these things, and oh, this is all just me. And it's like, no, that's the Lord revealing things to you though. And you have to almost be less self-focused and more welcoming to hearing him speak and recognizing when he's saying things that are in alignment with his words. Like God won't tell me, like if I had heard a thought that said, yeah, you're right, submission is for the birds, you don't have to do that, that goes in complete contradiction with his word. So that can't be God, right? Because he wouldn't contradict himself. But him telling me, hey, where you went wrong is you misapplied the direction I gave, because I asked you to apply it in a specific context. You took that, applied it in a completely different one, and you suffer the consequences. And now you're blaming me for the direction I gave, but you didn't follow the direction. So then that, like, it was an answer to a struggle I had in my head, and it didn't contradict his word. So I knew that it was him. I'm trying to study the Old Testament and I feel like I'm missing a lot of information. Do I need to start from the very beginning and work my way that way? That's a good question. I tried this. I think I kind of answered it when it came to the question of where do I start. But I tried this as well, like doing from Genesis to Revelations, and that didn't work out for me. So to answer your question, though, you don't have to do that. In fact, like what my pastor recommended to us actually this past Saturday was do the whole New Testament and then do the whole Old Testament. So highly recommend if you're trying to find a place to start when it comes to like reading the Bible in whole. I think that would be a good way to start. Thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you for submitting your questions. If you have any questions that I didn't answer in this video, please make sure to leave it in the comments below, and I'll try to make sure to get to all the questions. If you see a question that you feel led to answer, please answer it as well. Be kind, be graceful, be nice. Let's be a nice place over here on this side of the internet. But if you see a question in the comments that you feel like, you know, I can answer this, I've been there, please enter as well. Let's help each other out, so that like just studying the Bible stops being such an intimidating thing, when it's like one of the most beautiful ways to connect with God and just learn more about his word and all the things. So yay, thanks for sticking around with me. I'm so glad I'm able to finally put this out, and stick around for our Bible study series where we're gonna be going through a book of the Bible, just unpacking it together. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.